What's going on, guys? It's Patty V. This is Wave Watch. I have a very, very special episode for you guys tonight. One that I'm expecting to get a little pushback from the fan base, but I don't really care. I'll be honest. You know me, I'm a guy that likes to sit down and bridge gaps. I have NIL agent Mr. Noah Reisenfeld on here tonight. I've already sat down with him. We've already talked a lot of things. Here's a little brief synopsis of what we talk about. We talk about him first and foremost. We talk about Noah. We talk about how he got into NIL as a whole. I know there's probably questions about who he is. He's young. He owned that in our interview. He talks about that. So we get to know him first and foremost. A lot of the other stuff we talk about is education. We want to learn more about NIL. There's a lot of things out there that people don't understand, and I hope that he can spread some education here, really some perspective as well as an NIL agent, what he focuses on, what matters to him, what matters to players, that type of thing. We talk tampering. Listen, I know that's a hot button topic. We talk about what goes into that, what that looks like, what tampering even is right now in this landscape. And then, aside from that, obviously, we're going to talk about Darian Mensah. We're going to talk about Tulane. There's a lot of things in here. So you guys check it out. I appreciate him for coming on. Stay tuned. All right. Patty V here with EVP of NIL and business development for Young Money APAA Sports. Man, love to have you on today. Congratulations on everything that's going on in your life. Feels like there's a lot of things happening for you, happening for your players. But thanks for joining me. How you doing?
Great, man. Great. Appreciate the opportunity. I love getting on, talking the space, talking ball, and ultimately just kind of being able to express my opinion, my perspective on the space. I think it's something that's new, changing by the day, and a lot of emotions and a lot of news and a lot of people that are so honed in on this space. I think it's so interesting given the kind of Wild West format right now.
Yeah.
And ultimately just really appreciate you for giving me the opportunity to get on here and talk with you, and look forward to kind of exploring how we go through this conversation.
Yeah, no, candidly, I mean, that was the whole goal for today. I know we were talking a little bit before, and we started kind of going down the rabbit hole. And I was like, "Hey, let's pause. Let's get chatting, recording, so we can get all that on camera."
Yeah.
But that was my goal for today, was really just have you on, kind of give your lay of the land of what this wild west is as far as NIL goes. Give your perspective on all things. If we could touch on Darian Mensah, we'll touch on Darian Mensah. Obviously, with my Tulane background, I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah.
And anybody who's followed me for a long time knows that I'm a guy who likes to bridge gaps. So, happy to have you on and appreciate you first and foremost for taking the time.
No, man, my pleasure.
Yeah. So cool. So I guess first things first, just kind of give me your background. Like, give me an idea of how you ended up in this space. I know the name Young Money, a lot of people don't understand. It's kind of more Anheuser-Busch backed, right? But explain all that, and then we'll dive into other things.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'll kind of give you a background on my life, my story. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. Spent some time kind of bouncing around from different places, and played at IMG Academy in Florida. Went on to play college baseball. Was always surrounded by athletes. My best friend, who the reason I actually ended up with Young Money and got into the space in general, Jeremiah Davenport. He played basketball at University of Cincinnati for 4 years, and then went on to play at Arkansas. His last year is overseas now. But when the NIL space started, my father is a lawyer. My whole family runs the law firm. It's been around in our family for 70 years. Always had an interest to get into representation field. Not necessarily being a lawyer. School was never really my thing. I'm more of like a hands-on kind of guy. Love to kind of just be in the mix and learn that way more than, sitting in a classroom. Everybody learns different. And so luckily, really blessed by God to be able to be in the position I'm in. It really just naturally happened. My best friend was asking me, at the time when I had finished baseball, I got hurt, and I just didn't want to continue school. I felt like I could kind of make a way on my own without a degree, and ultimately decided to start a podcast, which was like the first thing I did. And I was able to make a lot of really, really valuable connections through that platform I built very, very quickly. Started doing some things around Cincinnati, had some great relationships already established with guys like Drake Kirkpatrick, who played in the NFL for a long time, Pac-Man Jones, who, obviously everybody knows who that is. And then ultimately, guys like T. Higgins, Isaiah Simmons, just knowing those guys from being around, was able to really leverage those relationships and start to kind of, pave a way for myself through business. I joined on to a tech startup called Hamza Tech with a guy, my boy named Ben. And we had created this clothing concept that had like NFC chips in them, where you could upload NFTs, tickets to sporting events, different things where you could kind of withhold those in your clothing, like scan it
Yeah.
to get into games and stuff. It was a really cool concept. We raised some money for it. Ultimately, just ended up not working out for multiple different reasons, but from there, kind of pivoted. Into this role, which was helping Young Money, APA Sports, sign some athletes. Um, you know, my best friend was first and foremost, and then was able to kind of just, forge the relationships between them and some NFL players. I hosted a party Super Bowl weekend in Phoenix, Arizona, when the Eagles played the Chiefs. And at that party were stars like OBJ, AB, multiple NFL players, probably 20 guys, about 5 or 6 guys that were entering the draft, guys like Hendon Hooker,
Yeah.
and some other players. And Audie came and he's like, "Who the hell are you?" And was just like, how do you know all these guys? And ultimately, I was just like, "Hey, man, I've got great relationships, blah blah blah." And he was like, "Well, we should explore, some sort of part-time thing with me. You could help me out, I could help you out."
There you go.
Ultimately, I used to come home from school every single day and watch Ballers as a kid, and it was so funny. Like, was I always like trying to somewhat be an agent or like talent management? Yes, like literally in high school, me and my friends, like, well, one of my friends, we created this like music management group. Like, it was just something that I was always like somewhat subconsciously interested in, because baseball was at the forefront of my mind and the
Mhm.
career I was pursuing. And then even throughout baseball, like there were times when NIL started where I was like trying to sign my friends at like, and I was an athlete, like, so ultimately was able to, um, really capitalize on the way that my life kind of just was turning out. Right. And so when Audie offered me a job, I considered it. And, at that point I was really in no position to turn anything down that came my way. So just found a really, huge calling and passion with this field. I'm a former athlete, around former athletes, seen a lot of them get taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And so, I was able to surround myself with Audie, and I think a lot of people recognize the fact that I'm young. Was blessed to be around Audie. When I first started this, given how young I was. Obviously, really understand sports. My father was an agent way back in the day, even when he was a lawyer. For baseball, he represented guys in the MLB like Drew Denson, multiple other MLB guys,
Yeah.
and really, kind of just took it upon myself to really dive headfirst into this business. And so what I mean by that is, the first real order of business I did, where I was really in the mix every day and being around, was I actually flew and to live. I left Cincinnati. Landers Nolly, who was a basketball player at Cincinnati, signed with Audie for the draft, and I went to live with him for the whole pre-draft process. I dropped everything in Cincinnati. I left my apartment there, and just dropped everything and went, and really just was going to the gym every day, taking him to and from, and being there for him, and just spending time, and saw like, man, I really like this, like, love being in the gym, love being the guy that people come to when they want to get a hold of him, or do anything, and ultimately just be there to protect Landers. I gave him my word that I thought signing with Young Money APAA would be the best move for him. And ultimately, yeah, I know, in our conversation you mentioned, um, the idea of, everybody thinks of Young Money, but the APAA side of this, Audie, Peter, Alex, Andrew, that's Audie and his 3 brothers. that, co-founded the agency with him along with Wayne and Boog and Ray. I think, and Mac Main. I think that, people's perception of what we try to do is definitely, skewed by the rap side of it, and just the history of the rap industry. But then when you bring in the Anheuser-Busch family, the 16th richest family in the world, behind this operation, having done multiple, business ventures themselves, obviously, all the way up to Anheuser-Busch, to SeaWorld, to Busch Gardens in Tampa, to owning the St. Louis Cardinals Major League Baseball organization for 40 years. There's a lot of things that they bring to the table that you really can't find in any other sports representation group in all of sports, not just football and basketball and soccer. So, given that unique mix, I was able to really, understand the value of what they're able to provide. And I feel like I connect well with the younger, generation and guys that are playing right now, given my young age. And I also understand how to sell what we have. And so, I was really able to just kind of get to a place where I, was really passionate about helping guys, make sure they're taken care of. We've worked with a variety of different athletes. Some guys that make very little money.
Mhm.
Some guys that are obviously reported to make millions, and at the college level, at the NFL level, at the NBA level. Audie's done 5 record-breaking contracts in the NBA. We've done over $1 billion in contracts in the NFL level, and ultimately, really just so blessed to have Audie. He was instrumental in my fast track success. I've obviously only been doing this for about 2 or so years, and the three portal windows I've done, and the NFL and NBA athletes that I've worked with in the short time frame, is definitely impressive. But without Audie, it wouldn't be possible. He saved me from a lot of bumps and bruises that people typically take in this business, because of his experience of being in it for over 15 years. And was able to really guide me, and even where times where I'm like, nah, man, you're still wrong. He stood on the table and really helped me see the business side of things. So, from there, when I first started, we, it was a full-time thing, but it wasn't like there was like a full-time relationship, right? So now, fast forward 2 years later, I've moved to Tampa, where Audie lives. This is where all of our NBA and NFL guys do pre-draft training at House of Athlete, aka now known as Compound, with Yo Murphy, who trains anybody from Devontae Smith, Leonard Fournette, Alex Anzalone, Alec Pierce, Zaire Franklin, and guys all over the NBA as well. And really just inserted myself in the mix and was there every day. And so, kind of to the point where we're at now, I've really taken it upon myself to grow our NIL division. We didn't really have one. And I came in and really expanded that to a point where, I feel that we've set the precedent that we're the number one group in NIL football and basketball. And, I think it's a very interesting world. Obviously the topic of conversation with your fan base is Darian Mensah, and I also represented Jaheim Otis from Alabama, and then multiple other high caliber players, and was really able to see the ever changing side of NIL this year more than last year. Last year we did a good job in the portal in football, but the growth we've had this year was like 4,000% in deals we were able to secure for our players. And so I think that, with that growth, we were able to see a lot more complexity within the sport. And I think that, it's only headed for the best. And I think it's amazing that these guys are able to, take advantage of what's going on right now and ultimately change their families' lives forever. So Yeah, I know that was a long tangent. I don't want to,
I didn't want to
keep going,
stop
but
you. I was like, yeah,
yeah,
tell me
no,
more.
no, I know. But yeah, I think that's, at least a good overview of kind of how I got here. And, obviously it's not a super complex breakdown, but hopefully gives a general idea of, kind of how I ended up where I'm at now and how we as a company are where we are at.
No, it's I mean a great synopsis, background, whatever you want to call it, of you and the company. So I think that that hits the nail on the head for anyone out there who is curious. I know there's a lot of Green Wave fans specifically who would probably like to know who the heck you are.
Yeah.
And part of that too is people don't understand, and you can I'll let you go into more detail here. At least the way I'm thinking of it, and correct me if I'm wrong. Is this NIL space now is continuous, right? Like
Yep.
in the past, like a kid might transfer and that's it. Like it is what it is. But this is all relationship based. And you've mentioned, you have pretty good relationships with a ton of people. This is all relationship based, just like the NBA, just like the NFL, where yeah, Darian Mensah might leave, right? He might go to a new school for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, like you're still going to be working with teams and schools like Tulane to bring other students there. Uh,
Right. Exactly. I'm actually, I just talked to Coach Summerall last night for about 15 minutes, working to help him get another player. Um, you know, uh, Definitely going to be working to help Tulane in any way I can. I mean, I already brought Ty Cooper, or help facilitate that. Ty obviously made that decision.
exactly.
Um, you know, the biggest thing is, and like I mentioned when we were first talking, this stuff's like NFL free agency now,
Mhm.
and it's not the old fashioned version of college football, where kids just kind of go through a normal recruiting process, right? It's you know hey, I need you to help me with my recruitment, because obviously the money's involved and everything like that. There were multiple situations, even with Ty Cooper, like I'm not, I'm not taking really anything, he's going in there to have a good football opportunity. So the understanding of what we charge or whatever that may be, that's another thing I think is so interesting. It's so relative, the percentages. The industry standard, pretty much every NIL agency charges 20%. When people hear that, they think it's outrageous because the NFL and NBA standard is 3 to 5%, right? NBA is 5, NFL's 3. um, Really, where the relativity comes in is, we ran some numbers with some people that do analytics and stuff, like a um a $10 million deal in the NFL is relative to a $1 million deal in college football right now. And so if you do the numbers on it, 3% of 10 million is 300,000. 2% or 20% of 100 or a million is 200,000. So it's actually relatively less than what you're making as an agent at the NFL and NBA level. And when you're talking about millions of dollars, um, you know, what people don't understand is there's so many instances where these kids are not getting paid because they don't have the fine print, they don't have the support staff of an agency behind them, and so what I always tell kids, one, negotiation skills we bring to the table are very, very impressive because of what we do at the NFL and NBA level. So how we negotiate and how we go about this process, one, is extremely professional manner, and two, you know I can't tell you how many times a kid going in, his first offer's 500,000, right?
Mhm.
And we double it by the time we're in the mix, and sometimes triple or quadruple it. So when you go into the mix, let's say your first offer is 250,000, right? But we end up getting you $1 million. Well, if you're giving away 20%, you're still getting 800,000, which is technically, you know, 650 more, or 550 more than you originally would have got.
Mhm.
um, and you're also protected with a whole brand behind you, and you really put yourself in a position to make sure not only you get paid, but you really can expand on what you're making, right? And when you have a family like the Anheuser-Busch family, they have opportunities for kids to invest in real estate early on, invest in tech, invest in different opportunities that not always come people's way just because they made $1 million. Because typically when you're getting involved with a family like that, you have to have hundreds of millions, if not billions, of wealth. And
Mhm.
so the access and the opportunity that we bring to the table for these guys, If we're not providing a guy that makes $1 million, $400,000 in value, if we're only making 200K, then we're not doing something right. And so people also don't incur the costs of training when they go to the professional level, right? If we sign a kid on NIL and we make enough to double what we pay for training, we always, no matter how good or bad they are, we always guarantee them that we're going to pay for their training. And so that's a whole nother use case, because a lot of kids that don't end up being a top prospect, they don't get their training paid for. So when you have a group that's willing to invest some of the money they make off of you back into you, that's a whole nother use case, you know? So all these things I'm listing, and then there's the business management side where
Sure.
helping them understand financial literacy. You know, people love to talk about, well, this kid should get all of the money. Well, unfortunately, if a kid has never made a dollar in his life and then he goes to make $700,000 in college, that's a lot of money. One, that you're going to have to pay taxes on, but two, you can really set your life up for the rest of your life with that kind of money if you invest it the right way and put it in the right situation. And so having that financial literacy and
Mhm.
having that understanding of what you can do with your money, but how money works and how you should budget and how what you should spend and what you shouldn't, and being able to have access to different lenders that won't charge you crazy interest rates just because you're young and in college with a ton of money. There's a lot of things that come with being with an agency. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of NIL agents in this space that are, a guy on the street, like
Mhm.
literally just coming in and collecting a check and then never speak to the athlete again, right? And I understand from that perspective, when you're talking about things like that, then yeah, it really sets a bad precedent for guys like myself and our agency and other agencies that really try to do the right thing. So, it's definitely a fine line. I think there's a lot of gray in this space. And so ultimately, it's just, understanding the ins and outs are so much more complex than someone just calling someone and saying, I want this much money. Like, there's so much, like, going back and forth with collectives and school officials on contracts and making sure that we're using Darren Heitner. Shout out to Darren. Darren's been instrumental in getting some of these deals done. He's the number one NIL attorney in the country. And there's a lot of fine print in these contracts where these kids, they don't have to be paid on certain, under certain circumstances. And if one thing goes wrong, then they're not guaranteed their money. And if you're providing these schools your services as an athlete, making them billions of dollars, then you should be fully guaranteed your money, right? And so there's so much that comes with that. So yeah, I think that's kind of I guess a little bit of a deep dive into the complexity of how we help guys and
Yeah.
really what goes on in this space.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I think there's so much unknown about NIL, and that's where a lot of the frustration comes from. I mean, you hit the nail on the head where there's a lot of agents that are just kind of guys on the street, right? And I think
Yeah.
that that's what a lot of fans see, right? Like even my wife, who's not a football fan at all, she just watches and she complains about the absurdity of the money that's coming into college football. And I'm
Yep.
trying to explain from the business aspect, and she doesn't understand. But then she talks about the agents, and she's she doesn't want to know. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to educate, which is the main reason I wanted to get you on and talk
Yeah.
more. I would love to know more about specifically like the gray area, right? Like it feels like the wild, wild west, and I don't even specifically know what question I have there. I think I just
Mhm.
wanna know rules wise, like what
Yeah.
rules are there? I'm sure there's tampering rules. I'm sure there's other rules, and I think I saw one of your tweets the other night, where you technically you can't tamper because you're not with a school,
Right.
but I'm sure there's tampering rules and there's rules in place for these things, and I'm sure it's happening in other areas. But just kind of explain to me those types of things and what goes
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, world. I mean, here's the deal. Everybody's doing it. Tampering is this term that, fans and everybody puts this like dark cloud over. It's really not that big of a deal. Because the school that feels like they're getting tampered with is literally doing the same thing to other schools, right? So, um, agents definitely play a role in that. I think that, it's somewhat of a middleman buffer to kind of get around the NCAA rules. Um, I think there's a lot of schools that depend on agents to help them get players that they've, kind of sought out as their, top targets in the portal, and sometimes guys that aren't in the portal, right? And I think the best thing about involving at least sophisticated agents in that process is it protects the kid from losing focus on the season, right? I think there's so much that's to be said about, you know, schools trying to get, you know, throw money at kids or whatever. And I think that throughout the season, that the kids should not be focused on leaving, right? And that it should be, you know, we're focused in on the game, and that's how I approach it. I don't speak to my players that I sign for NIL representation until the season is over or until they ask me. You know, that's not my role. My role is to, you know, protect them. And as an agent, you know, in this space, you know, people need to make sure that they allow the student athlete to not only focus on the rest of the season, but schooling and completing their, you know, necessary education to be able to go ahead and really, you know, put themselves in a situation to continue on to have success, whether they stay or leave wherever they're at the current moment. And so this tampering idea of tampering and whatever people want to call it, like everyone's doing it, you know, as much as, you know, people think this school tampered with this school, you know, the second school is tampering with, you know, three other schools outside of that other school, you know. So it's just like this wild west. And you know, the rules of it are very slim. There really aren't any rules. There's no regulations. um, you know, I think people's desire to have rules in place are great, but unfortunately, people don't understand. Again, I keep using this word complexity of how hard it is to imply rules in this space, because right now you have the collectives that are a total separate entity from the school.
Mhm.
Now, with the House settlement in July, that changes, right? And that goes to now the schools will be paying the players directly. So that kind of changes. There's a salary cap that's getting put into place in some way, shape, or form with the rev share. And ultimately, um, will the collectives go away? Absolutely not, right? They will use those to give guys more money to have competitive advantages over other schools. And I think that, you know, what's crazy about all this is that um, that this stuff is so new that people don't understand. Like, it takes time to imply these, you know, rules and guidelines. You have to go through the government. It has to go through things like Congress, you know, because you're talking about not only billions and billions of dollars in an industry, but you're also talking about separate entities, right? The NCAA really, their biggest sport is basketball, believe it or not, because they don't really control football. They don't control the bowl games. They don't control the playoff. They really are only able to tell schools when they can and can't recruit.
Yeah.
And so people don't understand that there's so much more to than just stamping guidelines on college sports, because what rules are going to be in place for basketball, you can't do for football, you can't do for volleyball, baseball, softball, like there's it's going to have to be a situation where, you know, these leagues then now separate from the NCAA, which is unfortunate because then you're talking about losing the focus of getting an education.
Yeah.
And that's where this stuff gets really dicey and hard to apply rules, because the NCAA somewhat still needs to be involved. Because then, if you turn this into a situation where they're just playing sports, then what's the point of school?
Yeah.
And you know, education is so important. I know I spoke about not having a degree, but you know, that's not the typical way for everyone, right? Especially to get in this position that I am in now. I mean, I could have went to Harvard, and I don't think I could have landed it as of a good of a position that I have now, in title and position of power that I'm in. So I don't necessarily think, I'm not sitting here saying that the degree is ultimately going to put kids in a position to do whatever they want in life, but it's obviously still so important to get your education while playing sports, and ultimately getting it paid for most of the time, right? So I'm taking advantage of a free education is more than anything, especially at a school like Tulane, like Duke,
Mhm.
prestigious university, like all these other schools that, you know, these kids are blessed to have an opportunity to attend.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I wanted to go with my next question. There's so many questions. Once you dive into that, right? There's so many
Yeah.
questions off there. But I think looking at it from the perspective of a Tulane fan or a Duke fan, or another small school, right? Or small educational school, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it. I know Duke has a massive basketball program and they're growing their football program, obviously.
Yep.
But what do you say to some of these folks that are fans of the smaller schools and their fear that this is basically pricing them out of ever having a chance? I don't know if they ever had a chance, I'll be honest,
Yeah.
but like what do you
Well,
think it changes as far as some of these small schools? Do they
well, I
now
mean,
or have more
yeah,
parity? Go ahead.
yeah. I mean, I think. Sorry, I mean to cut your question
No,
short.
I'm rambling.
Man, I can't. I don't know. I mean, it's tough to answer that. I think. I mean, shoot, look at Tulane. You guys were right there up until the last week against Memphis. I think if there was a win against Memphis, I think that there would have been maybe a chance, probably not. But like I think that there definitely is opportunity to go and do it. The problem is, and that's what you look at now is when you have success like that, you have guys like Darian Mensah, you have guys like Makai Hughes, Alex Bauman, all these guys that have entered the portal. Get those opportunities at bigger schools and anybody that blames a kid for going and making hundreds of thousands if not millions of dollars, then I I don't really have much to say to those kind of people, because at the end of the day, we're all in our perspective fields to make a living. Money is definitely not everything. Money is just a way of getting through life and being able to have access to different things the more you have, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
um, but ultimately it's really about being able to kind of adapt in this world for the smaller schools. And so Duke went 9-3. They had a really successful season, and they felt like they could get better at the quarterback position, right? So ultimately, it really just depends. I think that, for example, Tulane is in a really good situation with John Summerall. Him and I have had multiple discussions. We have a really good working relationship, and I'm doing everything I can to help him. Uh, Besides the comments, I made, that's just a whole separate situation, to be honest with you. But really, I have no bias towards one program. I'm here to help kids, make sure they're protected, and ultimately put them in good football situations. And I can't tell you, um, shoot, with Jaheim Otis, we left over $500,000 on the table elsewhere to go to Colorado because it was a better football fit. Uh, Even with Darian, we left more money elsewhere on the table. Duke is obviously not the highest breadwinner of college football, so there were comments made by certain reporters too that like there were teams that we reached out to. I can promise you this: there was not one team I had to reach out to. Darian was definitely the most coveted player in the country. Whether the season was over or not yet, I'm not really wanting to get into that. But even when the portal opened and he was a player in the mix, Darian was highly coveted. Very pretty much every SEC school that it doesn't have a clear plan at quarterback for the next year or two. Every single ACC, every single Big Ten. So I think that um, it's really just being able to adapt and being able to understand that this is the way things go. And I think that one of the biggest things that these smaller schools can start to do is really look to bring in corporate sponsors for their program. I know there's been talks about private equity firms being able to buy into ownership of college teams. And I think that that would provide an opportunity to maybe level the playing field a bit. I think there's so much that's going to unfold in these next couple of months, years, to really set how the college football and college basketball, mostly landscape looks for the next 20 years. And so I would say, I think that schools definitely have the opportunity. I mean, look at Boise State. They don't have a ton of money. They were able to just build a talented roster, and pave a way and paint a picture that they could get to where they got. And I think that they did a great job at that. I think Schools, like Tulane, have done an amazing job at adapting to the ways of today's world. And I think that, ultimately everybody really does have a fair chance to be in a situation to accomplish success and give themselves, an opportunity to get to a point where they're in the mix of being in a playoff contention.
Yeah. Hey, great answer. Listen, I hope so. I think that the main thing I was trying to figure out there is should it be a fear? And I think it's natural that a school like Tulane just becomes a feeder school,
Yeah.
which is essentially how people and it's happening. I
Yeah.
mean, you see it.
Look at it. Mackay, Darian, Alex, like these guys have really capitalized on the year they had. And ultimately I think it's unfortunate being a fan of a team that, most people would say is a feeder, but I think that, like I said, when you're in the hands of a coach like John Summerall, who is not gonna is gonna stop at nothing to make sure that he has success,
Mhm.
to ultimately put himself in a position to go get another job eventually, right? I
Sure.
don't, I mean, no disrespect to Tulane, but at the end of the day, he wants to level up himself, and go make more money and go be at a bigger conference eventually. Obviously, that was the discussion had this year. He was
Mhm.
in the mix, and he was offered the job at multiple situations, but I think he's waiting for his perfect situation, and ultimately, I have got nothing but respect for that man. I've known Coach Summerall since he was at Troy. We represented some players from Troy. I have a relationship with one of the coaches on staff that I actually went to high school with, Hunter Sims, whose
Oh,
older brother is Blake Sims, and ultimately just really think that they're going to do a hell of a job in continuing the success that they've had, and really putting themselves in a position to continue being at the top of that group of five,
yeah.
conversation.
And I've said, and we can wrap this up. I know we'll be going for a minute here, and I'm sure you got things to do. Um,
I'm
I've been
enjoying it,
saying this
man.
for I appreciate it. I've been saying
Yep.
this for a while on conversations that I have on in front of the camera. It's a good problem to have in a sense. If you have players that are elevating their status enough to where they're going and they're making millions, or you have a coach, even last year, Willie Fritz, that moves on and goes to a power school, and then you get Summerall who comes in and everybody's worried, oh, does he move on after 1 year? I said, hey, if he moves on after 1 year, that's a good problem to have. That means you had
Right.
a great year, right?
Right.
And if you continue to do that, it's a long road. I think that's what Tulane fans don't understand. You don't become a national champion overnight, and maybe you never do. Let's be honest. You're
Right.
Tulane, and I hate to say it like that. Massive fan of the school. It takes time to build there to
For
even be
sure.
in the discussion. I
And
think
they've
that
had great success. Great success.
sure, sure, and I think that the new and now I'm just going off topic here, just ranting. I think that the new college football playoff format obviously adds excitement and it adds levels to that to where you feel like you have a chance, and
Yeah.
maybe Summerall does stick around at a school like Tulane because then you can build and have a shot every
Right.
year. Yeah, I'll shut up.
No, no, no. I 100% agree. No, you're good, man. I think, um, that Tulane will definitely see themselves get into the playoff eventually. Is actually the head coach at Charlotte calling me. Um,
There you go.
but that was Tim Albin calling me. Um, but ultimately, man, I think Tulane will eventually see themselves in a playoff, if not next year. I think John Summerall, like I said, is a hell of a coach. He's a great defensive mind. Defense wins championships, and shoot, I wish nothing but the best. I mean, I got a player at Tulane. I
Yeah.
want them to succeed. I have nothing wrong with the fan base. I think just to speak on that real quickly. Obviously, there was a lot of hate thrown my way when this all originally happened. Obviously, didn't really pay it any mind. But when you have fans messaging your mother, and giving her address and threatening her life, I definitely lost my cool, and I definitely apologize to anybody I offended in the Tulane fan base. But you know, at the end of the day, I think that really. For me, I want nothing but to help Tulane. I want nothing but to have good graces there, and I'm going to continue to do that. And I think that that people will see that definitely. Had a great conversation with Coach Summerall last night, and I know that they're still looking for some players, and I'm doing everything I can to help them. Given again my relationship with Hunter Sims, who's done an amazing job for Tulane. I've got nothing but love for him, and hopefully we can help put them in a position to continue on the success they're having, and hopefully we can play a small part in that.
All right. Hey, I appreciate you for coming on. You got any closing thoughts or anything you want to say as we go out here?
No, man, I think first and foremost, really appreciate you. I really enjoyed the conversation. Definitely willing to do it again anytime.
Yeah.
And all I could say is I will be there for the Duke Tulane game, and look forward to interacting with Tulane fans. And I know obviously it's an interesting situation right now, but I wish nothing but the best to Tulane. And again, like I mentioned, I'm still in the works with Coach Summerall and Hunter, and helping make sure that you guys land a few more prospects in the portal. And ultimately, just really appreciate the conversation, appreciate the opportunity to educate, and hopefully, get my side of it out there, and hopefully people can, understand that I want nothing but the best for the kids. And we definitely we pride ourselves on putting guys in great financial situations, but ultimately really good football situations. And so, like I said, appreciate your time, man, and look forward to rewatching the episode, and hopefully people can take something from this and understand that there's a whole nother perspective of this and understanding of this world, and hopefully get some education on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome, man. Thank you. Appreciate you for coming
Yep.
on.
Thanks so much, man.